I was standing in my own kitchen when I heard my son say the words that would change everything between us forever. "She's old enough for a nursing home." I want you to comment below and let me know where you're watching this from, because I need to know I'm not alone in this. I need to know that somewhere out there, someone understands what it feels like to have your heart ripped out by the child you gave everything to. His voice came through the heating vent, clear as day. My house, the house I'd worked 3 jobs to keep after his father died, had these old vents that carried sound like a telephone line between floors. I was putting away groceries, my arthritic hands struggling with a jar of pickles, when I heard him upstairs in what used to be his childhood bedroom. He was on the phone with someone. His wife, I'd learn later. And he was talking about me like I was a problem to be solved, a burden to be shuffled off somewhere out of sight. "The house has to be worth at least $1 million now," he said. "Maybe more. This neighborhood's gone crazy. If we move her into Shady Pines or one of those places, we can sell it, split the money, and finally get out of debt." I gripped the edge of the counter. My vision blurred. Not from tears, not yet. From something deeper. A kind of shock that freezes your whole body while your mind races ahead, connecting dots you never wanted to see. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved more than your own life, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. Like the floor had opened up beneath me and I was falling through my own history, watching every sacrifice I'd made turn to ash. And if this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own home, do me a favor and check the description box below. There are more stories like mine there. Stories of people who were underestimated, pushed aside, and who found a way to take their power back. Let me tell you about my son. His name is Brian. Not some dramatic villain name, just Brian. Brian Mitchell Thompson. I named him after my father, a man who worked himself to death in a coal mine so his children could have better. Brian was my miracle baby. I had him at 42, after years of trying, after 3 miscarriages that nearly destroyed me. When he finally came into this world, screaming and red-faced and perfect, I promised him everything. I promised him safety, opportunity, love without condition. I kept those promises. Every single one. When his father, Jim, died of a heart attack when Brian was only 12, I didn't crumble. I couldn't afford to. I worked as a nurse during the day, cleaned offices at night, and did medical billing from home on weekends. I didn't date. I didn't go on vacations. I didn't buy myself anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. Every penny went into that house, into Brian's education, into giving him the life his father and I had dreamed about. He went to college. Got his degree in business. Married a woman named Ashley. Pretty, ambitious, always dressed like she was on her way to somewhere more important. They had 2 kids. Grandchildren I barely saw anymore, even though they lived just 40 minutes away. But that day in the kitchen, listening to him reduce me to a financial transaction, I realized something I'd been avoiding for years. My son had become someone I didn't recognize. Or maybe he'd always been this person, and I just refused to see it. "She won't even know the difference," he continued. "She's getting forgetful anyway. Last week she couldn't remember where she put her glasses." My glasses had been on top of my head. I'd been looking for them while wearing them, and yes, it was embarrassing when Brian pointed it out. But I was 68 years old, exhausted from a life of giving, not suffering from dementia. There's a difference. I stood in that kitchen for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The afternoon light was coming through the window above the sink, hitting the little ceramic rooster I'd bought at a yard sale 30 years ago. Everything in this house had a story. The scuffed hardwood floors where Brian had learned to skateboard indoors despite my protests. The crack in the ceiling from the time he and his friends got too rowdy during a sleepover. The pencil marks on the doorframe of the pantry where I'd measured his height every birthday until he turned 18 and told me he was too old for that. This house wasn't just property. It was my life, documented in scratches and stains and memories. And my son wanted to take it from me. I didn't confront him that day. I didn't storm upstairs and demand an explanation. Instead, I did something I'd never done before in my life. I pretended. I smiled when he came downstairs. I asked him if he wanted coffee. I acted like the obedient, slightly confused old woman he apparently needed me to be. You okay, Mom? He asked, studying my face. Of course, honey, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. Why wouldn't I be? He relaxed, smiled, kissed my cheek before he left. Love you, Mom. Love you too, sweetheart, I said. The words tasted like poison in my mouth. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, the same bed I'd shared with Jim for 20 years, and stared at the ceiling. The house creaked and settled around me like an old friend. I thought about all the times I'd defended Brian to his teachers when he got in trouble. All the times I'd covered for him when he came home past curfew. All the times I'd believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. And he was planning to sell my home out from under me. By 3 a.m, something had shifted inside me. The hurt was still there. It would always be there. But underneath it, something harder and colder had taken root. I'd spent my whole life being soft. Being accommodating. Being the woman who sacrificed so others could thrive. Maybe it was time to be someone different. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen. Made myself tea. Sat at the table where I'd helped Brian with his homework, where Jim and I had planned our modest dreams, where I'd sat alone for 15 years after Jim died, and I started to think. If Brian wanted to sell this house, then this house would be sold. Just not the way he was planning. The next morning, I called my lawyer. His name was David Winters, and he'd handled Jim's will and a few other small matters over the years. He was surprised to hear from me. Mrs. Thompson, he said, his voice warm. It's been a while. What can I do for you? I need to know about my options, I told him. Regarding my house. We talked for an hour. I learned things about property ownership, about trusts and powers of attorney, about what I could and couldn't do. Most importantly, I learned that the house was entirely in my name. Jim and I had owned it together, but when he died, it had passed to me. Brian had no legal claim to it whatsoever. Unless I gave him one. Has someone been pressuring you, Martha? David asked carefully. No, I lied. I'm just thinking about the future. Making plans. After we hung up, I sat in my living room and looked around at my life. At 58 years of accumulation. 58 years of building something that mattered. And I made a decision that would change everything. I would sell the house. But first, I would teach my son what it meant to underestimate the woman who gave him life. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life, and I'd lived through my husband's death, so that's saying something. I had to pretend. Every single day, I had to be the confused, slightly helpless mother Brian apparently expected me to become. And let me tell you, it went against every fiber of my being. I'd always been sharp. Even as a teenager, I'd been the one solving problems, managing chaos, keeping things running. My mother used to joke that I was born middle-aged. Now I had to convince my son that I was losing my edge, that I needed him to step in and take control. It made me sick. Brian started coming by more often. Always with that concerned expression, that careful tone. How are you doing, Mom? He'd ask, like he was talking to a child. Did you remember to take your medications? I'd been managing my own medications for 40 years. I had a system. But I started forgetting pills, leaving them on the counter where he'd see them. I started asking him to repeat things even when I'd heard him perfectly the first time. I left the stove on once, on purpose, just a pot of water, nothing dangerous, and let him discover it. Mom, this is exactly what I'm worried about, he said, turning off the burner. You could have burned the house down. I'm sorry, honey, I said, making my voice waver. I just get so scattered these days. The guilt of manipulating him lasted about 5 seconds. Then I remembered what he'd said. She won't even know the difference. Ashley started coming with him. She'd walk through my house like she was already measuring it for staging, her eyes calculating, her smile fake. She'd compliment things. Oh, what a lovely credenza, Martha. While probably already planning which donation center would take my furniture. Have you thought any more about what we discussed? Brian asked one evening. We were sitting at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd fed him countless meals, helped him study for tests, listened to his heartbreaks and dreams. What did we discuss, honey? I asked, blinking like I couldn't quite remember. He exchanged a look with Ashley. About maybe moving into a community where you'd have help, people your age to socialize with. A nursing home? I said, letting my voice crack. No, Ashley jumped in, too quickly. Not a nursing home. An independent living community. Much nicer. They have activities and meal plans and... But I love my home, I said, and that part wasn't acting. This is where Jim and I built our life. Where I raised Brian. I don't want to leave. We know, Mom, Brian said, reaching across the table to pat my hand like I was a dog. But we have to think about what's best for you. What's safe? What's best for your bank account, I thought. What's safe for your financial future? Let me think about it, I said finally, wiping at my eyes. Real tears this time, but not for the reasons they thought. After they left, I stood at my living room window and watched their car pull away. Then I went to my bedroom, opened my laptop. Yes, I had a laptop, and yes, I knew how to use it, and continued the research I'd been doing. Selling a house isn't simple. There are appraisals, inspections, mountains of paperwork. But I'd been a medical professional who'd managed complex insurance claims and billing codes. I could handle it. The question was how to do it without Brian finding out until it was too late. I contacted a real estate agent named Patricia Chin. Wait, no, let me be accurate. Her name was Patricia Cunningham. She was a shark in the best possible way. When I explained my situation, vaguely, carefully, she understood immediately. You want to sell fast and quiet, she said. Exactly. I can do that. But Martha, you need to be absolutely sure. Once we list this house, once we accept an offer, there's no going back without serious legal and financial consequences. I'm sure, I said. And I was. Every time I doubted myself, I remembered Brian's voice through that heating vent. She's old enough for a nursing home. We listed the house as coming soon on private real estate networks. No public listing. No yard sign. Within a week, we had 3 interested buyers. The neighborhood had indeed gone crazy, just like Brian had said. Young families with tech money were buying up everything they could find. The offers came in. $1 million. $1.1 million. 1.2. I accepted the highest offer. Cash sale, fast close. 30 days. During those 30 days, I had to maintain the performance. Had to keep acting like I was considering Brian's suggestion about the community. Had to nod along while he and Ashley brought me brochures for Shady Pines and other facilities, each one more expensive than the last. This one has a waiting list, Ashley said, showing me a glossy pamphlet. But Brian's friend knows someone on the board. We might be able to get you in sooner. How efficient of them. They'd already started networking. It looks nice, I said, studying the photos of cheerful seniors playing bingo and doing water aerobics. But it's so expensive. Don't worry about that, Brian said quickly. We'll figure it out. With my money, I thought. With the money from selling my house. Except they didn't know the house was already sold. The closing date was set for a Tuesday. I arranged to sign all the papers at the title company while Brian was at work. The buyers, a young couple with a baby, ironically enough, were thrilled. They loved the house. They had plans for it. Good plans. A nursery in what used to be Brian's room. A vegetable garden in the backyard where I'd planted roses. It hurt to let it go. But not as much as it hurt to be betrayed. I deposited the check, $1.2 million, into a new account Brian knew nothing about. Then I did something I'd been planning for weeks. I changed the locks. I also left something for Brian and Ashley. A note. Simple. Clear. Taped to the front door where they couldn't miss it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 2 days before the closing, Brian brought up the nursing home again. Mom, we really need to make a decision. The house. What about the house? I asked innocently. Well, we need to talk about selling it. Getting it ready for market. There's a lot to do. Oh honey, you don't need to worry about that, I said, smiling. I've got it handled. He looked confused. What do you mean? I mean, I've been thinking about what you said. About moving. About the community. You're right. It's time. Relief washed over his face. Really? Mom, that's wonderful. I'm so glad you're being reasonable about this. Reasonable. That word. When were you thinking of listing the house? He asked. Soon, I said. That wasn't a lie. The next few days were a blur. The closing happened. The papers were signed. The money was transferred. The house legally changed hands. And through it all, I kept smiling, kept nodding, kept playing the part of the cooperative elderly mother. Brian and Ashley made plans. They were going to help me pack. They were going to take care of the sale. They'd already talked to a real estate agent, not Patricia, someone else, who'd given them a preliminary valuation. Probably around $900,000, Brian told me over dinner at a restaurant. He'd taken me out to celebrate my decision. Maybe $1 million if we're lucky. If you're lucky, I thought, sipping my wine. If you're lucky. The day finally came. The day I'd been building toward. The new owners were moving in that afternoon. I'd already moved my essentials, clothes, photos, important documents, into a furnished apartment I'd rented across town. A nice place. Better than Shady Pines, that was for sure. Brian and Ashley were planning to come by that morning to start the packing process. They had keys. The old keys. The ones that no longer worked. I wasn't there when they arrived. I couldn't be. Instead, I was at my new apartment, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee, imagining the scene. They would pull into the driveway. They would walk up to the front door with their boxes and their plans and their barely concealed greed. They would put the key in the lock. And it wouldn't turn. My phone started ringing at 9:47 in the morning. I was still in my new apartment, unpacking boxes, when I saw Brian's name flash across the screen. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. 30 seconds later, he called again. Then again. Then Ashley started calling. Then Brian again. I silenced my phone and continued unpacking. I'd waited weeks for this moment. I could wait a few more hours. The note I'd left on the door was short. I'd agonized over every word, rewritten it a dozen times. I wanted it to be clear without being cruel, firm without being vindictive. Though honestly, after what they'd tried to do, a little vindictiveness would have been justified. This is what it said. Brian and Ashley. Asterisk, by the time you read this, the house has been sold. Closing was Tuesday. The new owners take possession today at noon. Your keys no longer work because the locks were changed yesterday. Asterisk. Asterisk, I heard you, Brian. Through the heating vent. Every word about the nursing home, about selling my house, about me being too old and confused to know the difference. Asterisk. Asterisk, you were wrong. I knew exactly what was happening. I just chose to wait and see how far you'd go. Asterisk. Asterisk, the house sold for $1.2 million. The money is mine, and it will stay mine. I've moved into an apartment and I'm quite comfortable. I don't need your help, your concern, or your continued interference in my life. Asterisk. Asterisk, if you're angry, I understand. But remember, you taught me that family is just a financial transaction. I'm simply better at business than you thought. Asterisk. Don't come looking for me. Mom. I taped it to the door at dawn, before the sunrise, before the neighborhood woke up. I'd stood on my own front porch, the porch where I'd taken Brian's first day of school photos, where Jim and I had kissed goodbye every morning, and I'd stuck that note right at eye level. Then I'd walked away. My phone buzzed with a text. Then another. Then a string of them. What the hell, Mom? Call me right now. You can't do this. This is illegal. We're calling our lawyer. I turned off my phone. The apartment was smaller than the house, obviously. But it was mine in a way the house had stopped being the moment I'd heard Brian's betrayal. Every piece of furniture here was chosen by me, for me. No memories attached. No ghosts. Just possibility. I'd kept only the things that mattered. Photos of Jim. Brian's baby pictures. Because no matter what he'd become, I'd still loved the child he'd been. My mother's wedding ring. the ceramic rooster from the kitchen. Little pieces of a life I was choosing to carry forward. The rest, the furniture, the dishes, the accumulated debris of decades, I'd sold or donated. Let someone else make memories with those things. I was starting over at 68 years old, and I was traveling light. Around noon, I turned my phone back on. The messages had multiplied. Angry texts from Brian. Crying voicemails from Ashley. Then, finally, a different tone. Desperation. Asterisk mom, please. We can talk about this. Asterisk. Asterisk I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. Asterisk. Asterisk we need you. The kids miss you. Asterisk. The kids miss me. That one almost worked. Almost. But I'd seen my grandchildren exactly 4 times in the past year, always at their house, always for obligations, birthdays, holidays. They barely knew me. I was the old lady who showed up with presents and left before dinner. Brian had made sure of that. I texted back finally, just one message, asterisk I need time. Don't contact me for a while. Asterisk. Then I blocked his number. Blocked Ashley's too. It felt like cutting off a limb, but a diseased one. A limb that was poisoning the rest of me. The days that followed were strange. Quiet in a way my life hadn't been in years. No phone calls from Brian checking on me. No surprise visits. No performance required. I could just be. I took walks. Long ones, around my new neighborhood. It was different from the old one. More urban, more diverse, more alive. I found a coffee shop I liked, a library within walking distance, a park where people brought their dogs. I started talking to people. Real conversations, not the superficial pleasantries of neighbors who'd known me for 40 years but never really seen me. A woman named Linda who worked at the coffee shop and had recently left her own toxic family situation. An older gentleman named Roger who'd lost his wife and understood about starting over. I began to feel like myself again. Not Brian's mother. Not Jim's widow. Just Martha. A woman who'd survived hard things and was figuring out what came next. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Late at night, in that new apartment, I'd wake up sometimes and forget where I was. I'd reach for Jim in the darkness, expecting the familiar shape of him, the warmth. Instead, I'd find empty space. And I'd remember, he was gone. The house was gone. And Brian, my son, my miracle baby, he was gone too, in a different way. 3 weeks after the sale, I got a letter. Not a text, not a call, a physical letter, delivered to the apartment. Brian must have hired someone to find me. Or maybe he'd charmed the information out of Patricia. Men like him were good at that. The letter was handwritten. His handwriting, the same scrawl I'd seen on countless homework assignments and birthday cards. Mom. Asterisk I don't know what to say except I'm sorry. I messed up. I said things I shouldn't have said, thought things I shouldn't have thought. You have every right to be angry. Asterisk. Asterisk Ashley and I are struggling. The business failed. We're in debt. Serious debt. When I talked about selling the house, I was desperate, not thinking clearly. I thought I could take care of you and solve our problems. I see now how that sounded. How it was. Asterisk. Asterisk I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for anything except maybe eventually, a chance to make this right. The kids do miss you. I miss you. Not your house, not your money. You. Asterisk. Asterisk I love you Mom. I'm sorry I forgot to show it. Asterisk. Brian. I read that letter 10 times. Looked for the catch, the manipulation, the angle. But I couldn't find it. Maybe it was genuine. Maybe he really did understand what he'd done. Or maybe he was just better at writing than I'd given him credit for. Either way, I wasn't ready. The wound was too fresh. The betrayal too deep. I put the letter in a drawer and went back to building my new life. But I kept it. I didn't throw it away. If you're watching this and you've ever had to choose between forgiveness and self-protection, you know how complicated it is. There's no easy answer. No clear path. Just a lot of gray area and hurt feelings and hope that maybe someday, things can be different. Check the description box below if you want to hear more stories like this one. Stories about people who found themselves at crossroads and had to make impossible choices. 6 months after I sold the house, I was sitting in that coffee shop, the one I'd come to think of as mine, when I saw him. Brian. He was thinner than I remembered. Older looking, which was impossible since only half a year had passed, but grief ages you in ways time doesn't. He was standing in the doorway scanning the tables, and when his eyes found me, something in his face just broke. I'd unblocked his number 2 months earlier. We'd exchanged texts. Careful ones. Polite. He told me about the kids. Emma had lost her first tooth, Jacob made the soccer team. I told him about my apartment, about the friends I was making. We didn't talk about the house. We didn't talk about what he'd done. But now here he was in my coffee shop, looking like he'd been crying. "Can I sit?" he asked when he reached my table. I nodded. We sat in silence for a long moment. Linda brought him a coffee without asking what he wanted. She'd heard enough about the situation to make her own judgments, but she was kind enough to keep them to herself. "The business is officially gone," he said finally. "We declared bankruptcy last month. Lost everything except the clothes and the kids' stuff." "I'm sorry," I said. And I was. Despite everything, he was still my son. His pain still hurt me. "Ashley left me," he continued. "Moved in with her sister in Portland. Took the kids. I get them every other weekend, but," his voice cracked. "But I'm living in a studio apartment and working retail to make ends meet." Part of me wanted to say, good. Wanted to tell him this was karma, justice, the natural consequence of his choices. But I'd spent 6 months learning to be more than just my anger, and that part of me stayed quiet. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked instead. "Because I need you to know I understand now," he said. "What you did, selling the house, cutting us off, I was so angry. I thought you were being cruel. Vindictive. But I get it now. You were protecting yourself from people who saw you as a means to an end. From people like me." He looked up, and his eyes were red. "I'm not here to ask for money, Mom. I swear to God, I'm not. I'm here because," he stopped, struggling. "Because I've been thinking about what you wrote in that note. About how I taught you that family is just a financial transaction. And you were right. That's exactly what I did. I reduced you to a number, to equity, to a solution for my problems." "Yes," I said quietly. "You did." "I don't know how to fix this," he said. "I don't know if I even can. But I'm trying to be better. For Emma and Jacob. For myself. And maybe, if you're willing, for you." I took a sip of my coffee. It had gone lukewarm while we talked. "What does better look like?" "Honest," he said immediately. "No more games. No more hidden agendas. Just truthful conversations. Even when they're hard. Especially when they're hard." "That's a good start," I said. We talked for 2 hours. Really talked, maybe for the first time since he'd become an adult. He told me about the business failure. A mix of bad decisions, worse partners, and terrible timing. He told me about his marriage falling apart, about the warning signs he'd ignored because admitting the problems felt like admitting defeat. I told him about the apartment, about the freedom I'd found in letting go of the house. About the grief too, because it wasn't all liberation. I'd lost something when I sold that house. A part of my history. A connection to Jim. Even if it was the right choice, it still hurt. "I miss Dad," Brian said suddenly. "I think about what he'd say about all this. About what I tried to do to you." "He'd be disappointed," I said honestly. "But he'd also tell you that one mistake doesn't define a life. That you can choose differently going forward." "Is that what you think?" he asked. "That I can choose differently?" "I think you already are," I said. "Coming here. Being honest. That's a choice." He nodded slowly. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Do you forgive me?" I'd known this question was coming. I'd been asking myself the same thing for months. The truth was complicated. "I'm working on it," I said. "Forgiveness isn't a switch I can flip. It's a process. Some days I'm angrier than others. Some days I remember you as a little boy and my heart breaks for both of us. But I think, yes. Eventually. I think I can forgive you. What about now? He asked. Right now, in this moment? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Right now, I can offer you something. Not forgiveness yet, but something almost as important, a chance to start over. To build something new between us. It won't look like what we had before, but maybe that's okay. Maybe what we had before wasn't as good as we pretended. Tears rolled down his face. My son, my grown son, crying in a coffee shop while strangers pretended not to notice. Thank you, he whispered. We didn't fix everything that day. You can't repair years of damage in one conversation. But we started something. A different kind of relationship, one based on honesty instead of obligation. Over the following months, we met regularly. Sometimes in the coffee shop, sometimes in the park. He brought the kids when they visited. At first, Emma and Jacob were shy around me, the grandmother they barely knew, but gradually, carefully, we built connections. I learned that Emma loved to draw. I bought her sketchbooks and pencils. Jacob was obsessed with dinosaurs. I took him to the Natural History Museum. Brian learned that I wasn't fragile. That I'd built a whole life without him, thank you very much. That I had friends and hobbies and plans that didn't include being anyone's emergency fund. Ashley came back eventually, but the marriage didn't last. They divorced quietly, amicably. She apologized to me in her own way, a short letter acknowledging her role in the nursing home plan. I accepted the apology without seeking a deeper relationship. Some boundaries were better left intact. The house, my old house, I drove by it once. Just once. The new family had painted the front door yellow, planted new flowers. There was a swing set in the backyard where my rose bushes used to be. It looked happy. Lived in. Loved. It hurt less than I thought it would. I used some of the money from the sale to travel. Places Jim and I had always talked about but never managed. I went to Ireland and walked through ancient castles. I went to Italy and ate pasta in small villages. I sent postcards to Brian, to the kids, even to Patricia, the real estate agent who'd made it all possible. I donated money to causes that mattered. Women's shelters. Nursing education funds. Organizations that helped seniors avoid financial exploitation by family members. That last one felt personal, pointed. It was. I'm 70 now. 2 years have passed since the day I heard those words through the heating vent. 2 years since I decided to stop being the woman everyone expected and start being the woman I needed to be. Brian and I will never have the relationship I once thought we would. That innocent, uncomplicated mother-son bond is gone, shattered by his betrayal and my retaliation. But we have something else now. Something harder one and maybe more real. We have honesty. We have respect. We have a relationship we're choosing every day instead of one we're just assuming. Is it enough? Some days yes, some days no. But it's what we have, and I'm learning to be grateful for it. The money is still mine. All of it. I've made that clear, and Brian has stopped asking, stopped hinting, stopped looking at me like a retirement fund. He's building his own life now, making his own way. He got a better job. He's dating someone new, a nice woman named Rachel who teaches 3rd grade and actually seems interested in getting to know his kids instead of his finances. I'm proud of him. I didn't expect to be able to say that again, but I am. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. Selling the house in secret, cutting Brian off, refusing to be the cooperative elderly mother. The answer is no. Not even a little bit. Because that act of defiance, that refusal to be diminished, dismissed and discarded, it gave me my life back. I'd spent 68 years putting everyone else first. My husband, my son, my patients, my employers. Always someone else's needs before my own. And it almost cost me everything. But I fought back. Not with violence, not with cruelty, but with clarity. With the simple, radical act of saying no to people who thought I'd given them permission to say yes to my life without asking. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, I want to tell you something important. You don't have to shrink to make other people comfortable. You don't have to apologize for taking up space, for having needs, for refusing to be convenient. Whether you're 25 or 75, you have the right to protect yourself, even from people you love. Especially from people you love. My son tried to sell my house out from under me because he thought I was too old, too confused, too powerless to stop him. He was wrong. And that wrongness, that fundamental miscalculation of who I was and what I was capable of, it cost him more than money. It cost him his mother's unquestioning trust, his easy access to family, his assumption that I would always be there to clean up his messes. Was it worth it? For me, absolutely. For him, I think so too, though he might not admit it. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the most important ones. I'll leave you with this: if you're in a situation where someone is trying to take advantage of you, to diminish you, to treat you like you're less than you are, don't wait for permission to protect yourself. Don't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect response. Act. Be smart, be strategic, but act. And if my story has resonated with you, if you've seen yourself in these words or recognized someone you know, please check the description box below. There are more stories there. Stories of people who refused to be victims, who found their power in impossible situations, who chose themselves when everyone expected them to choose someone else. Thank you for listening to mine.